Benjamin Franklin during the 18th century discovered electricity and created the very first electrical battery, and Thomas Edison in 1879 perfected the light bulb. These two inventions made household appliances possible. In the early 20th century, inventors used electricity's power through batteries and power lines to create the first electric home appliances. Some of the people who created these household appliances were Willis Carrier, who invented the very first air conditioner in 1902, and Earl Richardson, who invented the hot point electric iron, which was a huge success for him. James Spangler also created the very first vacuum cleaner, which he patented in 1908. By the 1920s, all the major cities were electrified, which meant that manufacturers and industries could stay open later and workers had longer and later working hours. In 1925, an advertisement for a Perfection oil range had a slogan which was "Turned kitchen hours into playtime with husband and kids," meaning that if you buy our household appliances, you will have more time with your family, which was a very big selling point in the 1920s.
Airplanes in the 19th century began as a mail-carrying service for the United States Post Office. At first, the post office was used to transport mail between cities, but by 1925, only 7 years after the first official airmail flight, the U.S. Post Office airplanes were delivering 14 million letters and packages a year. Airmail appealed particularly to bankers and other businessmen who regularly began to use it to move checks and financial documents more quickly, reducing the float on checks and the length of time that the funds were idle and unable for use. The development of weather forecasting systems allowed planes to begin carrying radios and navigational instruments. This way, it would be easier for them to know where they were flying to. Cargo and commercial airlines were promoted by both Charles Lindbergh and Amelia Earhart. In 1927, the Lockheed Company produced a single-engine airplane called the Vega. The Lockheed Vega's first flight was on July 4, 1927. It received immediate attention for its outstanding looks and high performance. The Vega became the aircraft of choice for Arctic exploration, ocean flights, airline use, and attempts to break aviation records. Amelia Earhart used the bright red Vega to become the first woman to fly the Atlantic in 1932. She later set other records in a Vega, including the first Hawaii to United States flight.
Henry Ford founded the Ford Motor Company in 1903. The same year, he created a Model A, which he sold for $850. 2 years later, he created a Model B, which he sold for $2,000. In 1906, he created the Model N, which he sold for $600. 10,000 cars were made to meet demand. 2 years later, in 1908, he made the Model T, which had an initial price of $850, which went down to $490 in 1914, which moved down again to $325 in 1916, and it went down one more time to $310 in 1921. In 1909, he declared that you can have a car in any color you want as long as it's black. He chose black because the black paint dried the fastest, and so they could create more cars faster and more efficiently. William C. Durant founded the General Motors in 1908. He offered several different models and different prices. Each year he changed the look of the car so that people would buy more cars to stay updated. It was like a sales tactic that he used to sell more cars. General Motors Acceptance Corporation was created in 1919, which let people pay their cars in little chunks. It was like credit. So in 1921, half of the buyers purchased their cars on credit, and in 1926, 3/4 of buyers bought their cars on credit. During the 20th century, specifically 1901, the average car cost $1,600, and there was a guy named Ransom Olds, and he thought that $1,600 was too much for a car, so he sold his car, which he named the Oldsmobile, for $650, which was 40% lower than the average car cost at the time.
In the 19th century, there were 4 different Americans who claimed to have invented or improved the machine gun. In 1904, the United States officially adopted the machine gun. but by 1914, the United States had already replaced both the water-cooled machine gun and the air-cooled machine gun with the German model, the Vickers, water-cooled machine gun. The cockpit offered the pilot no protection against weather or debris. The higher he flew, the colder the air became, and the sooner the frostbite set in. Without an oxygen mask until 1918, the aviators would suffer dizziness and even black out at high altitudes. It had been proven that more men had died in crash landings than they were shot out of the sky. Trucks and artillery trailers allowed soldiers to escape the chore of caring for horses and mules. The trucks had rubber tires with no suspension, so the trucks would jolt the drivers and the riders. Even though this happened, a truck ride was a lot better than marching.
The refrigerator was an electrically powered, sealed food storage appliance that replaced ice boxes, improved production, and lowered food storage costs. Ice boxes were used in homes before refrigerators were developed. Ice was cut from lakes and rivers in the northern United States or produced by ice machines in the southern United States. By 1876, America was consuming more than 2 million tons of ice each year, which required 4,000 horses and 10,000 men to deliver. In early America, ice was also stored below ground in ice houses that had roofs that were at ground level. In 1915, Alfred Mellows built the first refrigerator to contain all of its components. This machine was known as Guardian's refrigerator. General Motors acquired Guardian in 1918 and began to mass-produce refrigerators. Guardian was renamed Frigidaire in 1919. In 1918, the Kelvinator Company, run by Edmund Copeland, built the first refrigerator with automatic controls, the most important of which was the thermostat switch. Despite these advantages, by 1920 only a few thousand homes had refrigerators, which cost about $1,000 each. The General Electric Company, GE, purchased the rights to the General Motors refrigerator, which was based on an improved design submitted by one of its engineers, Christian Steenstrup. The development of domestic electric refrigeration had a tremendous effect on the quality of home life. Reliable, affordable refrigeration allowed consumers a wider selection of food and increased flexibility in their daily consumption. The domestic refrigerator, with increased freezer capacity, spawned the growth of the frozen food industry. Without the electric refrigerator, households would still depend on unreliable supplies of ice.